Hello and welcome to Foreign Affairs. Welcome to our viewers around the world and here in Ghana. This week, JoyNews is discovering that illegal mining is becoming a West African crisis. The artisanal mining sector in Ghana has been for a long time fraught with a myriad of challenges. Government's attempt to sanitize the industry is, however, proving to be futile. But now there's a need for action more than ever, as the United Nations is making its initial findings that the use of mercury, which is often associated with the mining sector, is beginning to bite hard. We'll hear shortly from the UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights as he shares with us his findings on his latest country's visit to Ghana. But first, we give you excerpts of the effects of mercury. It's called the Mercury Effect in our Hotline documentary compiled by Seth Kwame.
That's according to Interior Minister Ambrose Derry.
Indeed, when we started discussing with the commanders about getting involved, they were being hesitant. They said, look, in the past we've had this. At a certain stage in the past, we went, the security engaged illegal miners in the mines, in the pits in Obuasi. And after fighting there for a number of days, we got an order from the top to withdraw. Were we sure that we're not going to do the same? And we said, no, President Nana Akufo-Addo is different. He's going to go for the long haul, and that's what we've gone to.
This wanton destruction of the environment has resulted in many avoidable deaths.
There's a town in closer to Asekro called Bodie. Within a month, somewhere in 2007 or 8, 30 young people died. 30. Wow. And they came to tell me about the case, and I knew some of them were coming with coughing out blood, hemoptysis, and I knew that it was mercury poisoning. But when you ask the people, and even opinion leaders, they tell you that no, they went to see somebody's gold and there's a curse on them, anybody who stole it is dying. But I told them that it's definitely mercury poisoning.
Bodie Dompim, a community in the Wasai-Kropon district of the Western region, is about 64.3 kilometers from Tarkwa, and that is our first port of call in our investigation into the health impact of illegal mining in Ghana.
I am in the Wasai-Kropon district of the Western region where illegal mining activities are very rife. I have specifically come to Bodie Dompim also within this district. And here, scores of men and women have died through illegal mining. They inhaled smoke, dust, used chemicals they never knew were poisonous. So they died in their numbers. I'm here to interact with them about how it all started and what they are doing now about it.
The entire community is yet to recover from the disaster that hit the town a few years back. The lives of energetic young men were snuffed out like candle wicks. The community is still grieving. Before the ban on small-scale mining, Bordia was one of the busiest towns in the Wasai-Kropon district. Illegal mining was the mainstay of the economy here, and it kept almost everybody, including the chiefs, busy. Nana Kwabena Boateng I is the Tufuhene at Bordia Dompem. He was at the front and center of small-scale mining at Bordia.
Na me gra se ni bi enti mache code na mamiem no me pese be hu se makro ni nyina afirim enti metumi de se manu no mafim se be makro ni befum ansa na matoto be no akire no e ma me kobo wa na eniye de to be kwa me bo wa na moja wom.
This is scary because mercury is a very toxic chemical. Elemental methyl mercury are toxic to the central and peripheral nervous systems. The inhalation of mercury vapor can produce harmful effects on the nervous, digestive and immune systems, lungs and kidneys, and may be fatal. The Wasai-Kropon Government Hospital is where the people of Bordia end up when the coughs start. I have come here to meet the medical officer in charge, Dr. Ahmed Zakistan Musa, who links Nana Kwabena Boateng's situation to a possible mercury inhalation.
Miners use mercury as a way of extracting gold. And sometimes in the process, they inhale the mercury vapors. So mercury vapors could be toxic to the lungs and the respiratory tract. So most of them, they come with cough. You treat them, for the normal medicine we give for the cough, but they go back and they come with a cough. Because the cough is not due to infection, either viral or bacterial infection. It is actually due to what? The toxins of the mercury they are inhaling. So this is one of the main causes of what? Chronic cough in the mining areas.
Nana Kwabena Boateng coughed for over 2 months. He is not alone in this. There are many others like Kojo Mensah still battling for survival. In the case of Kojo Mensah, he has been coughing since 2011.
See, I didn't press me. To be there to the coffee container. I'm going to discuss in Chrom. Say, I say, Binya, so my dubia, I come on my care. I'm so okay.
A one on Kwana Obo.
A one on my boss of me, and my man come on, and I'm 19 was abre. I'm 19 as a metizo. Then one is here. The other day, Wapa was so did a Wapa the letter.
And who shared the Benema wing by
a Glamsino. Say, you were even the blast. I say, smoke, I say, it bomb. And we see it, the car, we see you. They don't want to be massa, Yadiano. So, then one now a Merco made. And so the Chigodum, when the to be massa, Yadiano. And I didn't hear any before the wedding. The other a capture. It will be shown about 4 years. And so, dancing on the Bayino, not a year.
The medical officer in charge of the Wasai-Kropon Government Hospital, Dr. Ahmed Zakistan Musa, says, at times it is difficult hearing persons like Kojo Mensah. He explains why.
But sometimes see that after the TB and all that tests, we don't actually see the cause of their cough. We give the right treatment, person still cough. So we tend to think that it's probably due to what? Especially to those toxins. So after cough there almost every day. Unless you don't do consulting, as long as you are consulting, you'll come with at least 5 people with cough.
Emmanuel Enim is another resident here who suffered this. He is lucky to have been cured.
210. I'm a machine. I am mobile. I will mouth Kasim. I say, if you true nice, I am prepared my buckets now a cocoa. And now, Mom saying it's infecting. To me buy because what's on 3 months, me a maybe.
It's not all the night to say my obo one corners now so yemre.
Man, be oha, me started me bo waka crab, I mean no na ijaye crab. As you see the new hobby.
Now,
Emmanuel is a free man. Many others have, however, died, as Kojo Mensah tells me.
It's na mad no what we say now.
Me the chibo no. Ya chia bibia nche say the nsa the gu adem rubber mo ane de meko no gu na etwi. Etwi ni sa ne emu kwa na beba emu no ba ya eto bia na edi.
When the deaths started, the chief Nana Kwabena Boateng and his people thought a curse has been pronounced on the community after gold belonging to some visitors were stolen. He recalls about 40 men died.
Sabi yati kuro ye mpeni mvodi ye ni munkwala omo yenkwala papa na omo yenkwala boni nti obi wu a ye nyina tu sa asoma si we de ono ne nsa ha no nti bia na ye load ni bia mpa yobo ozo wu a utum se nipa we de dabi ade ntina wawu me ne wokasa ne kura no ebi mo bo wawu wo ma e ba ya yoro nti ano ne ye nhwemu hu se ene na eye makuri ne nso bo anse ne be hu no eye Dr. Sapon ni team bi ne ba ye eno be encheche se sa mfuturo na etufa wimu no ekoba bia kwamanfo de mu makure no mo de tujama friends and acid no eno so ya share explain nti eno na akofa sa wo hawo no e de aba e ma ye gitu mu se ene na ya mpa ekwan ye fa so ya adwuma no enkoyi nti na ma sa wo hawo ni amani nyina no aba ene ni nyina no ye obi mo mo da so bo wa me hu na me kire wa.
It appears almost every household had the grinding machine, so imagine the extent of air pollution when they all start grinding the stones for the gold. With the start of the ban on small-scale mining, however, processing of the ore has stopped and the pollution has ceased. It would have caused serious health issues for my crew and I. And from this explanation by the Environmental Protection Agency boss in charge of Tarkwa and its environs, Prosper Yao Nkrumah, it appears we are still not safe.
Here you are. You are with us here from Accra, isn't it? Good. You are in the community. You are in the terrain. Assuming that the concentration of mercury in the ambient, in the environment, is that high, and you are walking around and inhaling and accumulating in your tissues. Later, when you retire, you are out of Tarkwa, and few years you realize that your system is being compromised, and that when your immune system becomes weak, then those toxins that you have accumulated in your body then begins to take over your systems. Actually, those heavy metals poisons affect our organs more, like you mentioned, the kidneys, the respiratory system, and things. It is quite dangerous. We need to be cautious.
Health facilities in these mining areas are under pressure as a result of the health challenges. The medical superintendent in charge of the Tarkwa Municipal Hospital, Dr. Frederick Yao Sapon, says their hospital is one of them.
It's very challenging. And you know, a lot of them don't even have the health insurance. So they just come and dump them and they leave. Because a lot of them too are from outside. Some are from the north, some from Ashanti region, Brown Hafo, in Zima area. They have no relatives. They just come and meet as a group and start working. So when something happens and they carry them there, they just dump them and they go. So you, the hospital, have to use your meager resources to manage them. And some of them, invariably, when they die, you don't even know the relatives. So we pack them from time to time. We announce if nobody comes, then we do a mass burial.
Oh, really?
Yes, we inform the district assembly. Then we get the personnel and go and bury them.
According to scientists, mercury occurs naturally in the Earth's crust, but human activities such as mining and fossil fuel combustion have led to widespread global mercury pollution. They add that mercury emitted into the air eventually settles into water or onto land where it can be washed into water. Another twist to this is that most of the miners lack the basic knowledge on how to even handle their chemicals. This is part of the many reasons a lot of them have died, and several others battling serious health problems. Issa Musa is a miner from the eastern region of Ghana who is not sure what his health status is because of the many years for which he has used mercury and other chemicals. He has started learning more about it.
I've learned what mercury is. I've been hearing the effects, but I've known from the studies that most of the things that we do, the way we extract the gold, it is not healthy. So I've been taught how to handle mercury, how to extract.
Sadly, many miners like Issa Musa stand a higher risk of developing serious health conditions because of his exposure to chemicals like mercury. At the University of Mines and Technology in Tarkwa, the Dean of the Faculty of Mineral Resources Technology, Professor Richard Kwesiamankwa, who has done a lot of research on this, explains what makes it more serious.
Mercury is applied after they get the gold concentrate. You get the gold concentrate, the small scale miner will say we are adding lead. So they add the lead and then they rub it against the black concentrate so that the gold can be incorporated into the mercury. After that, they will squeeze off excess mercury, and then most of them would burn the amalgam that is produced in the open fire. So that means the mercury fumes will get into the vicinity, and anybody passing by can inhale it.
The Environmental Protection Agency is very much aware of this health hazard. The agency's head here in Tarkwa, Prosper Yaunkroma, says everyone, including members of our documentary team interacting with the miners, is at risk.
The chemicals are dangerous, so therefore inordinate exposure to such chemicals definitely will affect the health of the people who come into contact with the chemicals, be it in the air, because for example mercury can appear in the form of a vapor. Okay, so it can be exposed to it by inhalation, or by ingestion. Because of the manner in which it is handled, you might not know that you are contaminated in terms of maybe a material that was handed to you. For example, you visit somebody in the neighborhood or in the area they are working. He might have handled the chemicals. He hands over something to you. It has come into contact with you. So as an innocent citizen, you inadvertently come across the chemical.
So the mercury eventually will catch up on us. Metallic taste in the mouth, sleeplessness, tremors, then eventually affecting the kidneys, most likely leading to dialysis and probably death. I don't have the direct statistics, but it is said that if you go to the dialysis center, many people who are there once upon a time came in contact with mercury. Some of them are small-scale miners.
The renal center at the Cape Coast Teaching Hospital, which serves both the central and western regions, is where most patients with kidney diseases visit for treatment. I have information it receives calls of patients from mining areas. I have come here to find out more.
Hello.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine. Yourself?
I'm doing well.
So,
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Kwame Boatin, and you are?
I'm Priscilla Dokwalite.
All right. Okay. So we are from JoyNews. We're doing a series of documentaries on common health diseases in mining areas. And I know some of the miners come here when they are sick. Why do they come here at all?
We have lots of clients from the mining areas, especially the western region, Tarkwa and Takoradi. They are more than half of our population. They come here for dialysis because they've been diagnosed with kidney failure, the chronic stage.
Statistics from the renal center reveals there is upsurge in kidney cases, and this increase happens every year. 35 in 2015 to 45 in 2016. It shot to 75 the following year, and by June 2018, they had already recorded 83. Dr. Yao Awuku-Asante is a doctor at the Renal Center of the Cape Coast Teaching Hospital. He has seen and continues to see many of these patients. He is worried many of his clients report at a time their kidneys are completely gone.
Well, a lot of our patients actually come in late. So they have what we call end-stage kidney disease, such that the kidney's activity cannot be reversed. So we can only help to support the activity of the kidney with what we call the dialysis machine. Unfortunately, we have had only few patients who will come in with what we call an acute event, such that it's reversible. So maybe by 3-4 sessions of dialysis, the kidney is back and is working and they don't require the dialysis. But most of those that we've actually seen or have been referred to us have end-stage kidney disease, and the only way to actually bring them a form of cure is to get a kidney transplant, which is quite a difficult task in our environment as well.
Why?
Especially with donors. People are unwilling to donate because we have had people who had all the funds, but they never got anybody to donate for them. And so they had to just pass on after a while.
So until the rich who can afford get donors ready to donate a kidney, Deputy Director for Nursing Services here at the Renal Center, Irene Jacob, says patients would have to do at least 3 dialysis sessions every week, and it is certainly not free.
You and I, we are working. You are plagued with this disease. God forbid it. What happens to you? Your salary, how much is it to take you through this? And if it's a chronic case, it means you're going to have this for life till you get a transplant. If that is not done, you have to rely on dialysis for the rest of your life. And it will mean that you'd have to pay 190, which is, almost 200 Ghana cedis. Some other places are charging even 250 and 260, but we are charging 290 because people in here are impoverished. The poverty line has been too bad. So you cannot, sometimes you have to put a bit, up there and ask for help to support them. We are doing a lot more in that direction, but we still have problems. Most of them would have to come just once, whilst they're supposed to come 3 times in a week, at least 3 times in a week.
What is the implication of that? Your inability to do the 3 sessions? And
because they don't have the funds to come, and after a short while, you see their bellies bloating and a whole lot of issues happening. Sometimes they stay off for about 2 weeks and they come in real bad state, and you still would have to dialyze and take off what they would have put on. It is really, really distressing.
It is equally distressing that innocent people not connected to mining are also suffering the effect of it. Dr. Janice Lovey, who is with the Renal Center, explains further.
So basically anybody who lives in that area and is exposed to the toxins, it may even be children who are playing, let's say, in the river that has been contaminated with certain agents, people who are drinking that water, people who are breathing that air. So you may not necessarily be working in the mine, but you have to be close enough. So people who live close to the mining areas, breathing that same air, probably drinking the water, yes, you can be affected, not necessarily the miners themselves. And even sometimes for the miners, especially if they work in established mines, let's say for the respiratory conditions, they probably will be wearing protective masks as opposed to the ordinary citizen who is not wearing a protective mask. So even probably they may have a little bit more protection than somebody who is exposed but is not using the mask.
The immediate past Chief Executive Officer of the Cape Coast Teaching Hospital, Dr. Daniel Asare, was the first to draw my attention to the havoc chemicals used in especially small-scale mining were causing to the kidneys.
The kidneys are supposed to filter most of our toxics in our body and send them out as excreta. But they also have sieves. They have what you call small pores that these things can go through. But heavy metals are heavy that they can't go through these pores, though they end up damaging the tubules and the pores in those kidneys. And so you have the kidneys unable to function adequately, able to do their function as critical because the heavy metals have damaged their functionality and the cells that does that.
At the University of Ghana Institute for Environment and Sanitation Studies, the next generation of scientists that will have the skill and knowledge to innovatively tackle the environmental and sanitation issues of this country are being trained. This institute is headed by Professor Chris Gordon, and he knows more about the effects of mining on innocent people.
The problem we have now between mining and health is the fact that the means and mechanisms and the rapid growth of mining is such that the health impacts have become much more widespread, not only on the miners themselves, which often leads to death, but also to people who are not involved in mining or in the mining value chain, but just because of their proximity or their downstream to a mining area, they are impacted.
I am back at the renal center of the Cape Coast Station Hospital. Some patients are in for their dialysis sessions. I need to engage some of them, but not until I have sterilized. I am granted access after covering my shoes and wearing a scrap.
So I'm getting the opportunity to enter the dialysis area to interact with one of the patients who came from a mining area. He has a kidney problem. I'm going to have a chat with him as to how it all happened, how long it took him to get to this hospital, and how he's doing. Is he able to afford payment? Let's go.
Well, so these are some of the findings that you get from the Hotline documentary. But it's time to unpack the matters. I had a sit-down conversation with UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights, Dr. Marcos Orellana. He tells me that the use of mercury is beginning to bite hard, and as he describes it, illegal mining is becoming a West African crisis. Dr. Marcos Orellana, thank you for speaking to JoyNews. You've been in the country for some days now, and you are carrying out a special exercise when it comes to human rights here in Ghana.
Thank you for having me. My name is Marcos Orellana. I'm the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. This is a mandate, a special procedure of the United Nations Human Rights Council that has been tasked with monitoring and reporting the situation of toxics around the world, the human rights impacts, particularly on the rights to life, health, and a healthy environment of exposure to toxics are of increasing concern, and my mandate sheds visibility on key toxics issues so that the international community and governments at various levels can take action to protect people against the harms and risks of exposure to hazardous substances. Among the tools that special procedures of the UN Human Rights Council use to carry out their task are official country visits. I have been very pleased to have had the opportunity to visit Ghana for 2 weeks upon the invitation of the government to understand better what is the situation in the country in respect of chemicals and wastes, in order precisely to share findings, share conclusions and recommendations of how things can be improved, as well as good practices where other countries can learn and implement them in their national levels as well.
When it comes to chemical waste, the concern is, or that notion has been widely held, that it's a Western problem or a problem of the global North. In countries such as Ghana, is that a matter that should be on the front burner as well?
So when the Toxics and Human Rights mandate that I now hold since 2020, when the Human Rights Council appointed me, when the mandate was created, it was very much a North-South debate. The mandate was created in order to address what at the time was the practice of the generation of hazardous wastes in the global North, in the industrialized countries, transferred across boundaries and then dumped in poor countries in the developing world. High-profile events in Cote d'Ivoire, in Nigeria, in other regions of the planet spoke about structural racism, about the insufficient attention to the means of control over the transboundary transport of hazardous wastes. In time, my mandate has been reframed, and it's no longer just about international transfers of hazardous wastes. Rather, it's about the life cycle of chemicals and wastes. And this new approach is something that every country in the world is grappling with. Industrialized countries, developing countries, the expansion of the global economy and the expansion of the use of chemicals in industrial activities mean that today the toxic footprint that the planet is bearing, both in the industrialized world as well as in the developing world, is exceeding what the planet can tolerate. And this is having serious human rights implications for millions of people around the world. Therefore, the mandate is looking both at the practices of industrialized countries as well as the challenges faced in the developing world for the sound management of chemicals.
For those who feel this is an abstract problem, how do you practicalize the situation to them, trying to make it very realistic? Because you've been tracking the cycle. How do you make it that relevant to the average, say, Ghanaian on the streets?
Yes, it is abstract in the sense that these chemicals are so small that we cannot really see them. But we know their impacts on human health and the environment. And in that sense, there's nothing abstract about toxic chemicals and wastes. People get sick. People that are exposed to hazardous substances suffer from all kinds of health complications, including terminal diseases such as cancers to various organs of the body. There's nothing abstract about that. The implications for human rights are direct.
And of course, you would say that it's direct, but when you talk about countries such as Ghana, in what areas would you say we need to focus on when it comes to the issue of dealing with chemical waste, for instance?
Earlier today, I had the opportunity to share my end of mission statement with the government as well as with the press. And some of the elements that are highlighted in these preliminary observations include, for example, the issue of illegal gold mining that uses mercury. The concerns here are significant. Mercury is a highly hazardous metal that is persistent. It cannot be wished away. It will persist in the environment for decades and generations, exposing people to highly complicated situations for health and otherwise. For example, mercury can cross the human placenta, and some of the highest impacts of mercury exposure are on fetuses unborn within the female womb. Similarly, mercury is capable of long-range transport, and so if it's released in one location, it can find its way to another. I put the emphasis on mercury use because I've been shocked to see that galamsey is not restricted to any one part of the country. It is a problem of significant proportions that is affecting the north, the south, the east, the west. It is contaminating miners in the fence lines. It is that lack protective equipment. It is being released to the environment, contaminating waters across the country. It is thus threatening the rights of present and future generations in Ghana.
Are there some unique findings that you've made? Because galamsey is no news to Ghanaians when you talk about it. We've seen the devastating effects here at JoyNews as well. We've carried out documentaries, Gold for Distraction, for instance, highlighting how the activities of illegal miners, for instance, impacting the environment. Have you made any unique finding that Ghanaians should be much more concerned about?
So the mandate that I hold as a special procedure of the Human Rights Council, what it does is sheds visibility on issues so that governments, companies and the international community as a whole can act on the challenges. And in respect of galamsey, as you rightly point out, this is not a new thing, but it has been increasing. And I am particularly concerned that the international instruments that have been designed to address these kinds of problems, small-scale gold mining, have gaps that are enabling emissions of mercury to be released to the environment from this sector. These gaps need to be reduced, closed, and countries that have the problem, which by all means, Ghana is not unique in that sense. There is a problem with illegal mining and small-scale gold mining in West Africa, in the Amazon rainforest in South America, in Southeast Asia. This is a problem of global proportions. And so it is quite encouraging to see that Ghana has adopted a national action plan to address the impacts of artisanal and small-scale gold mining. This is a very important step in order to take concrete action to deal with the problem. But at the same time, in reviewing this plan, I am concerned that the targets are not sufficiently ambitious, and the plan has no end date, no phase-out date for the use of mercury in the country, as if it were an unfinished horizon where mercury could continuously being used without any consequence. And that is not the case. Every day that passes is an urgent situation of aggravation of human rights impacts.
And let's be clear on that. What's your expectation on the use of mercury?
The expectation is very clear. Mercury should be banned for use and trade at every level, internationally, regionally, nationally. It should be given its consequences on human health and the environment, given its deleterious impacts on a range of human rights. Mercury should be regarded as other forms of environmental crime, much like poaching of endangered animals, much like trafficking of ozone-depleting substances. The stakes here are paramount.
Some experts say it's a technological challenge, the fact that you have elsewhere countries mining sustainably. But when you come to this part of the world, it's mostly a challenge. You agree?
Challenges in terms of technology are being addressed because there are alternatives to mercury. Mercury, in fact, is quite an inefficient method for extracting gold from the ore. There are much more efficient methods that don't involve the wholesale devastation of environments, the exposure of people to hazardous contaminants, the deforestation and loss of biodiversity, but they require capital investment. And that is where the international community has set up certain funds to support countries like Ghana in making the technological transition away from mercury-based extraction technologies towards mercury-free technologies. They exist, they are better in the sense that they are more efficient, thus take commitment to put them into place.
You seem to have some challenge with our policy approach. We'll delve into that shortly. But I want to take your thoughts on what you said, that this is a West Africa problem. But when you rate Ghana on that scale of West African countries facing this crisis, if I may call it as such, where do we find Ghana?
In my statement to the government earlier today and to the press, I applauded Ghana's leadership at the international level for taking the lead in strengthening multilateral environmental agreements in the chemicals and waste cluster. Ghana has, for example, in the context of the Basel Convention on the control of transboundary movements of hazardous waste, taking steps led actually for the amendments that are controlling in a better way the transfers of e-waste. Similarly, in another instrument, the Rotterdam Convention on International Trade in Chemicals and Pesticides, Ghana is also co-sponsoring amendments so that this instrument can overcome the paralysis that has undermined its effectiveness. These are very important elements that show Ghana's leadership in the region, in the African continent, and in the multilateral sphere.
But now to the policy approach. It's general. First of all, on the issue of illegal mining, which is also part of the problem, and the ban on the use of mercury. Let's start off from the issue of illegal mining. Our president has made that promise that he will deal with illegal mining, and yet the evidence is clear. He admits that there's still a bit more of a crisis in the sector. Why do you feel personally that policy measures have not worked over the years, and this is not just this government's unique problem in terms of tackling illegal mining here in Ghana?
One element that undermines the concrete application of measures is the lack of a plan. Without a plan that is comprehensive, that has a vision, that has timetables, that has identified who is responsible to take what measures in what time frame, then we're left with scattered policy responses which are usually ineffective because the illegal mining for gold using mercury problem is of a proportion that cannot be dealt through a piecemeal fashion. And so now having a plan is a very important step in the application of a policy that can address the problem. But having a plan, that said, is not enough. Now the second part is actual implementation on the ground, and that means engaging those who practice this kind of mining with a view to sensitization, awareness, but also, and critically, the provision of alternatives, because there are alternatives that are more efficient and cost effective, that can work in the benefit of the associations of small-scale gold miners. So it is quite an auspicious time for Ghana at this moment to have launched a national action plan to address mercury. Now the challenge is significant to put it into action.
There are concerns, and I don't know if that came up when you were engaging the industry, that part of the reason why we don't have political commitment is because you have elements both within government and outside who are politically connected persons infiltrating the sector and making it difficult for political actors to move and crack the whip. Is that of concern to you as well?
During my 2 weeks in Ghana, I heard a number of testimonies that spoke about the corruption in the police force that is tasked with enforcing the law. Now, this is a serious allegation, and of course it's a serious concern, because laws on the books are one thing, laws in reality make a difference in people's lives. Without adequate compliance and enforcement, because the local police is bribed or otherwise pressured by local politicians, then it is not only a problem of exposure to people to mercury resulting from galamsey, but more generally it is a problem of the absence of the rule of law and weak governance. These are structural issues, cross-cutting issues that require increased attention and commitment by the government to address.
So we need to deal with it?
Most definitely. The cross-cutting issues of governance and implementation need to be addressed in order for there to be gains in a number of issues. Galamsey is one of them, but there is a number of other issues that where the effective implementation of laws and measures is critical to success.
Government has announced a number of policies which many believe will drive the demand for gold, which means that it will equally scale up the demand for mercury. I'll give an example. For instance, the gold for oil deal. It's been announced by the government of Ghana that we intend to find cheaper sources of fuel using, for instance, gold, which is a resource that we have in abundance, in exchange for crude. Some of these policies, I'm sure you've looked at them, and I'm just wondering what your take is on some of these issues.
The problem is not gold per se.
Right.
The problem is mercury use in the extraction of gold. Gold can be and should be extracted without mercury use. There is the technology, there are ways of doing it, and so the policies of further gold extraction per se is not a problem. It's how is the government going to promote and implement that policy, and how does the transition to mercury-free technologies feature in that process of implementation.
And now let's scale this up to the international level. You are, of course, a rapporteur for the United Nations. The belief is that at the multilateral level, some pressure can be brought to bear on not just Ghanaian governments, but governments in West Africa to collectively tackle the use of mercury and also deal with the issue of illegal mining. How are you approaching that at the international level?
At the international level, one of the key instruments that governs this area is the Minamata Convention on Mercury. It is a robust instrument. It is the youngest in the family of multilateral environmental agreements, so it has had the opportunity to learn from the good practices of its siblings. And it's working. Mercury globally is being reduced, except when it comes to artisanal and small-scale gold mining. This sector, this kind of mining, is the largest source of emissions and releases of mercury in the planet, and by far it dwarfs the figures that follow from other sectors.
But when you say that,
such as
some
cement.
take you on when you make that point, because the belief is that you're letting go of the MNOs and the multinationals that come into West Africa to mine.
So the Convention on Mercury makes the distinction of several uses of mercury, products with mercury, mercury wastes. When it comes to the uses of mercury, one of the key uses is artisanal and small-scale gold mining. That's reality worldwide. That is not to say that large-scale gold mining does not have problems, which it does. And in my two-week visit to Ghana, I have identified several of them, including pollution, waste generation, dust, vibrations, inadequate resettlement, inadequate compensation, lack of benefit sharing with the government and the state as a whole, and with local communities in particular. But the impacts of large-scale gold mining, while they need to be addressed, cannot deviate attention from also the impacts of small-scale gold mining. And that's where the Minamata Convention is not working to reduce emissions of mercury from the small-scale gold mining. So at the multilateral level, there is an opportunity for Ghana, as it has done in other international instruments on chemicals and wastes, to take action and leadership to close the gaps and limitations and shortcomings that are impeding Minamata to fulfill its promise of no more Minamatas in the world. Let's recall, Minamata is the name of a city in Japan that was heavily impacted by mercury contamination in shellfish, its inhabitants suffering what is now known as disease. One of the key characteristics, ataxia, the inability to move the muscles. Some people losing their lives as a result of this condition as well, of the Minamata disease. So the promise of no more Minamatas is not being realized in the Amazon, in West Africa, in Southeast Asia, and in other places of the planet.
Will there be sanctions on countries such as Ghana if they fail to take action on this?
The international human rights system that has been set up by the United Nations and their specific role of special procedures of the Human Rights Council are not intended to come with a hammer to sanction countries that may be in non-compliance with their human rights obligations. Instead, these are mechanisms for international cooperation. If international law as a body of norms in the 18th, 19th century was concerned about the ability of states to coexist, so questions on boundaries and use of force, in the 21st century, international law is concerned about enabling international cooperation so that states may be able to address problems that each one of them acting separately cannot be resolved. Questions of mercury and gold scale mining is a clear example and point. And so the work of special rapporteurs and special procedures of the Council is precisely that, to channel cooperation, shed visibility, so that governments and other actors can focus their attention on where the problems bite the most.
We'll be wrapping up shortly, but we can't leave without touching on the human rights aspect. There's been a crackdown on illegal mining. We're seeing much more of the arrest of persons in the artisanal mines. The belief is that we, in some cases, have not respected their rights, in as much as we're trying to crack down on activities that cause havoc to the environment. How do you believe that the government should be going about its military operations against illegal mining?
Well, there's no doubt that there's a role for government in enforcement of law, and illegal activity requires government action in order to close the opportunities for making profits out of illegal activity. Right. There's no doubt that governments around the world, and Ghana is no exception, use the means available to them in order to deter illegal action. Now, that is not to say that there's a justification for the violation of human rights of those persons that may be detained or arrested because they are engaging in illegal activity. Everybody has fundamental rights to life and due process, including those people that may be using mercury illegally in small-scale gold mining. Those rights need to be respected as well. There's no contraposition, no opposition between these sets of rights. They operate concurrently. The government must take action, but it must do so in a way that respects the rights of every person.
What will be the next phase of your operation? Are you set to engage government officials about this and draw their attention in a bid to find a lasting conclusion to this?
So country visits are concentrated exercises in 2 weeks, but then comes a process of further investigation to write a report that will be presented to the Human Rights Council, that I will present in September of 2023, about a year from now. During this process, there's engagement with government authorities. In other country visits that I've had the opportunity to be invited to speak in universities, in assemblies of the private sector, in meetings organized with the government, in meetings of parliament. And so there's now an opportunity for further engagement to address the human rights issues involved in the sound management of chemicals and wastes.
Dr. Maxwell, as we wrap up this conversation, what would be that message that you'd leave with the people of Ghana? And what would you want them to know, or even more, hold their governments to account on?
Well, it is key to understand that chemicals and waste can have profound adverse implications on the effective enjoyment of human rights. We may not see these chemicals, and one day to another we may not experience the impacts and the harms, but day after day exposure or acute exposures can have significant impacts on people losing their lives, on people becoming sick and losing their lives, or becoming sick and being unable to work. There is a whole range of rights that are undermined by exposure to toxics, such as the right to life, health, a clean, healthy and sustainable environment, the right to food, the right to water, the right to housing. These rights must inform government policy in order to make of the right of every person in Ghana, the right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment, a reality. And that is why this mandate is exposing visibility on issues of chemicals and waste.
Are you hopeful that we'll secure that?
I am hopeful, I am optimistic. I think that Ghana has in the past shown efforts and commitments. There's much to be done, but with also the launch today of a 10-year plan for the sound management of chemicals and waste, there are increasingly the tools to achieve these objectives.
Dr. Marcos Orellana, thank you for talking.
Thank you very much for having me.
JoyNews.
Cheers.